Good evening, I'm Alyssa. Can everyone hear me okay? Good, excellent, thank you. I'm the events coordinator here at Labyrinth, and I'm so glad to see you all here tonight. Welcome to the second installment of Writers on Writing, an ongoing series of conversations about process and craft, hosted by Amy Jo Burns and Anica Mrose Rissi, with acclaimed guest authors whose work can be found in various sections of our store. Thank you to Amy Jo and Anica for putting together this wonderful panel, and thank you to the Princeton Public Library for co-sponsoring this series. Some logistics for tonight. Books by our guests are available for sale. You'll find them on the table behind you by the stairs. Tonight's conversation will be followed by an audience Q&A. At that point, if you have a question, please raise your hand up really high so I can see it, and I will bring a mic to you. We are recording tonight's conversation for our podcast, and so speaking your question into the mic will allow us to use it for the podcast. Otherwise, it will just be an answer without any sort of context. We will conclude with a book signing. You may pick up a book from that table behind you, bring it to the signing tables to your left, and then pay for the book upstairs on your way out of the store. There's no need for anyone to run up and down the stairs before you have your book signed. Also, by the table, by the stairs, is a sign-up sheet for our events newsletter. Please sign up tonight to receive once-weekly updates from us on our events here in the store, at the Princeton Public Library, around town. For lovers of creative writing, we have several great events scheduled this fall. Ed Park and Yoon Lee on September 17th, Joyce Carol Oates and Catherine Norrie Hughes on September 23rd, and Joyce Carol Oates will join us again with debut novelist Chita Rubert on November 11th, which is also co-sponsored by the Public Library. So we are so fortunate to have a group of talented and accomplished writers here with us tonight. I could easily go on at length about each of our guests, but we would run out of time for their conversation. So I'm honored now just to speak a few words, and we'll let them get to it. Amy Jo Burns' latest novel, Wait for Me, was the Today Show Read with Jenna pick for March 2026. She's the author of 3 other books, Cinderland, Shiner, and Mercury, which was a People magazine book of the week and an editor's choice selection in the New York Times. Anica Mrose Rissi is an award-winning author of more than a dozen books for kids and teens, including picture books, chapter books, middle grade, and young adult. Her essays have been published by The Writer and the New York Times, and she has worked as an editor in children's book publishing. John Vercher is the author of 3 novels, most recently Devil is Fine, a recipient of many honors, including being named one of Time Magazine's top 100 books of 2024. Longlisted for the Aspen Literary Award and the Penn Faulkner Award for Fiction. John serves as faculty at the Randolph College Low Residency MFA program and is assistant professor of English and creative writing at Monmouth University. Alexandra Villasante is an author, advocate, and painter. Her debut young adult novel, The Grief Keeper, was the winner of the 2020 Lambda Award. Her most recent novel, Fireblooms, received a starred review from Publishers Weekly and was selected as one of NPR's Books We Love 2025. She's contributed to several short story anthologies, including We Mostly Come Out at Night, 15 Queer Tales of Monsters, Angels, and Other Creatures. So now please join me in welcoming our panelists.
Hello, everyone. Is this on? Can you hear me okay? Okay. Thank you for coming out on this summer night. You know, when Anica and I were brainstorming this whole series, I have to tell you, talking about the middle was what I was most excited to do. It tends to be that thing that's got a bad reputation. Everybody says the dreaded middle, the yucky middle, whatever. But there's a lot of opportunity, what you can do in the middle of a book, of a short story, of a scene, of a chapter. So we're going to get into all of that. But I did want to say a huge thank you to Alyssa and to the Princeton Public Library. We love getting to partner with local people who love books, especially since our heart behind this is that we want to give back to the community that we live in, and just encourage the writers who are here, no matter what stage you are, if you've ever written something, if you've never written something, that you'll definitely get something out of tonight. But let's get to it, because I have a feeling there's going to be lots to discuss, lots of questions. John and Alex, I met them back in March, and we were on a traveling panel together. If you've never been to the Doylestown Book Festival, they do this thing that's called Books and Brews, where you can park yourself at a restaurant and then writers
highly recommend it.
Highly recommend it. Come see you, and then they talk about their books and the writing process. It's really fun. If you've never been, it's a great way to spend a Saturday afternoon. But I knew when I was with them, I was like, we have to do this again because we had such a great time. So, as a way to kick us off, I would love to hear, what do you think about the middle? Love it, hate it? And in addition, if you could maybe read a couple sentences from the middle of a book of yours, that would be, I think, a great way to introduce you to the audience. Alex, you want to kick us off?
I'll do that.
Yay.
I'll spare John this one time. So I think, can I both love and hate the middle?
Yes.
Because I think you're absolutely right. There's so much opportunity there. But when you are writing, whether you are a plotter or a pantser, there comes a moment where you feel, at least I think it happens to everybody, it happens to me every time, or I feel a little lost and I need some help to reorient myself to what's going on. And that's, I think, the feeling that people have when they feel that messy middle. And a lot of frustration can come out of that because you think, you might think, if my story is strong, if I'm a good enough writer, why do I feel that frustration? And I feel like that frustration is actually not that you're not doing something right, but that you are doing something right because it's presenting you with an opportunity to ask questions. So long story short, I am a slow convert to loving the middle, but I used to think of it as just like the bridge to get me to the end. Yeah. But now I really feel like it is, it has just such rich opportunity. Yeah. So I'll read a little bit from Fireblooms. Just to set this up, this takes place, it's a young adult speculative fiction, and it takes place in a tech utopia. And it's dual point of view, and this protagonist really does not want to be there, but he is there to help his mother, his estranged mother, because by him being there, she can access much needed medical need. And this is sort of the middle of his character arc, and his name is Sebas. I guess I expected something to go right, and that was my first mistake, or I was just not thinking at all. That's how I find myself in the kitchen staring at Mom, her face full of rage at 1 a.m. "You sack of shit," she says as a greeting. I freeze, and my stomach twists, just like when I was little. I don't know what I've done wrong, but I know it's gonna hurt. I swallow my confusion and stay quiet. I think I'll just leave it there.
Thank you so much. Yeah, John?
God, you're gonna really regret having asked me to this panel. I don't actually think about the middle. Which is why I thought
Get
it was
out.
kind of interesting. Yeah, that's my time. Good night.
Get out. Yep. Out.
I think about stories in terms of shape, and to think about beginning, middle, end feels very linear to me, and I'm not a linear thinker or a linear writer. So for me, the middle is just sort of the halfway point that I arrive to before I get to the other side. I don't really think of it as this sort of point where something has to happen, that some turn needs to occur. I mean, I think maybe when I was early on in my writing career, I thought about it that way because I had very much had the 3-act structure drilled into my head, and I'm a big fan of screenwriting, so you tend to think in 3-act structures that way as well. But I would say, especially in this book, for certain, it's non-linear in terms of time, and I mean, my flashbacks are told in present tense, my present tense is told in past tense. So I think, the middle doesn't hold any kind of either fear or excitement for me. It's just kind of there, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Will you read for us?
Yeah, because it's only one line. The chapter 12 is a one-sentence chapter. The only context you need is that the protagonist throughout has been talking to his dead son. And he says, "It is at this point, Malcolm, where things get quite strange."
Here, can you open it to isn't that beautiful to see that? Love it. Thank you.
Yeah.
That sounds like a middle, though. At this point, it gets strange.
It
Yes.
is, but like coincidentally. Like
Yeah.
I just kind of got there and I was like, I don't feel
Sure,
like
sure,
writing
sure.
a longer chapter. So let's prepare the reader for what's about to happen.
I'm with Alex on love it and hate it, but for different reasons. I love the unknown, actually, the feeling lost and the finding my way through it and the opportunity for discoveries and deepening of what I was doing that I didn't even know would happen. But the emotional side, the mind game of writing, of being in the middle of a project, that is where my doubts and fears come in. It's like if you've all seen the movie Never-Ending Story, you know, and he starts off on his little adventure, and we've got that initial excitement, and then we reach the swamp of sadness. And it's stinky, and it's full of sand pits, and you lose your horse.
And you never recover?
Why even keep going? Yes, exactly. And that's for me, the stink of that is now that I'm this far in and sort of know my characters better and know more of where I'm going and I'm making these discoveries, that's when I get those doubts of, but even with all this, what if I can't pull it off? And if I do pull off what I'm trying to do, what if that's still not special and good enough? That's when I feel I've entered that swamp of despair. At that point in the process. And but
think about that in the
I will read from the literal middle of my latest book, Girl Reflected in Knife, which is a contemporary novel, but it is woven throughout with a dark fairy tale. And when I turned to the center middle page, I'm on the fairy tale, and I'm also in a moment of change. When the girl awoke, something was different. She sat up in the clearing and glanced around, but aside from the suns rising into the treetops, nothing seemed changed since nighttime. Nothing outside her, at least.
Can you also show, I mean, it's just so beautiful to see it on the page like that. It just types that very beautifully.
Yeah. What about you? Love it or hate it? I know the answer, but you have to tell them why.
It might be because I'm a middle child. No, I only have love for the middle. Every single book that I've written, I change the beginning and the end 1,000,001 times, and then the middle never changes. I don't know why. I don't know why it is. I feel like once I get to the middle, and it's not, I'll say this, sometimes I write the middle first. Sometimes the middle's in the middle. I don't really write in order, but whatever that ends up being in the middle, it just feels like that's the anchor of the story for me. Like that's the middle.
Do you
of the
know
Oreo.
it's the middle when you're writing it?
No.
You're blowing my mind. Okay.
I mean, it's a mess. My writing process is like a necessary mess, but I think what I love about it is the middle is kind of like what breaks a story open. And something I just like to surprise myself. I think, writing a book takes a long time. And it's kind of fun to surprise yourself through different things when you just sit down with your notebook, whether that's, a change of point of view, a change of scenery. I like to do all those things, but I think what's important is that I don't sit down and say, okay, when I reach this middle point, I am going to have a change. And because I think sometimes when you do that, it starts to feel a little bit robotic. So sometimes it helps to just sort of get down a little bit of what you're thinking and then kind of look at it and then make more of what you're already doing. It is a little bit messy, but I think it's a good mess. So I will read, it's funny. I thought this was the middle of the book, but it's not. It's only page like 65. But I consider it the middle because I have a big point of view change. And Wait for Me is a story about the history behind a folk singer who disappears. So those first 60 pages are kind of what everybody in the world thinks happened to this folk singer. And then when you get to page 66 is when she kind of takes over and we hear her story. When she was a girl, Elle Harlow learned how to sing from a mountain healer who didn't speak. Mary was her name, and songs on Mary's Mountain didn't come from mouths. They came from silver creeks and West Virginia grassland, broken hearts, and blood spilled on dirt roads.
I love that. So, as a reader or as a writer, what do you love to see in the middle of a book? What makes it the right middle for your novel or for the novel that you're reading? Do you have a sense of what the middle should do? Like, what is its function? We talked in the previous conversation, many of you were there, about beginnings and how the beginnings set reader expectations that perhaps we are going to meet or not meet at the end. But what does the middle do? Like, how do you think about that? Or how would you think about it if I forced you to think about the middle, John?
This is her forcing you right now.
Yeah.
Right
Yeah.
now. Oh,
Yeah.
right. Oh, jeez. Ask the question again.
What should a middle do? What is its function in a novel? You mentioned the 3-act structure and how you don't always go toward that.
Yeah.
So if you're not trying to reach a peak of 1, 2, 3, or that like what is the function of a middle? How do you conceptualize what it is in a book? Alex can go first if you want her to.
I was going to say, I don't
Okay.
know.
I love what Amy Jo said about the breaking the story open, and the middle. And it's not necessarily appropriate for every book, but the middles that have stayed the most with me are ones that I get there, and it's caused me to go, wait, what? And I have to flip through the front and go, what did I just read? It has completely changed my perspective. It is everything that I thought I understood about a character or even a plot or just someone whose side I was on gets turned on its head. And that is my favorite kind of middle, because then it gives me the perspective of what just happened. And then I'm entering in a new world. I thought it was in the world. No, a new world for the rest of the book. So I have a couple of examples of like off the top of my head. Tracy Chee's 1,000 Steps into Night does that beautifully, because it has a sort of circular, it goes forward to the middle and then it loops back on itself in an amazing way. And then The Darkness Outside of Us by Elliot Schaefer also does that. No spoilers. That's my favorite middle as a reader.
Okay, I think I have something. I think if I'm reading something that does have like a quote unquote traditional narrative structure, then I do want the middle to surprise me, but I don't want it to surprise me in a way I expect, if that makes sense. Like, I don't want the surprise to be like, oh, that's surprising, but not really. Like, I kind of expected it by this page, and this is kind of the thing. Like, particularly because I like to see character arcs go south instead of like, they're getting better, or they're this terrible person, they're improving. Like, I'd much rather see, it's more interesting when they just become like worse people.
This says so much about you, John.
I mean, you're going to learn a lot about me tonight. Like, don't buy this guy's books. But I think, and I think that's why I've actually veered away in my own reading from books that are in a more quote unquote traditional structure. Like, I've been reading a lot more experimental fiction lately, and there's no middle there. Like, it's just it just kind of is, and it's usually more about sort of a manipulation of language and like the kids say, vibes. It's just like so. I think does that kind of answer the question?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. What about you, Amy Jo?
I mean, I mentioned it a little bit, but I do think a really successful middle is one that opens up the story where, you think that you're kind of headed down a narrative tunnel that's like this, and then you get to the middle, and all of a sudden it just opens really wide. And then you can look back, and like Alexandra said, you kind of see the breadcrumbs. I think that's really important. And by the way, I think you can always go back and add in the breadcrumbs once you realize you have a certain middle. Like I said, sometimes if you plan too much ahead, it doesn't quite work out. But to just give you some examples, like all of Jane Austen's books, like have some kind of important location change. If it starts in the country, they go to the city. If it starts in the city, they go to the country. Everybody's going to Bath. Like, there's something that sort of adds a different tempo when you have a location change. So that's, if you feel a little stuck, even if it's just in your rough draft and you're like, man, my wheels have stopped turning, you can ask yourself, should they go on a trip? That's what we do in real life, right? When we feel stuck, we're like, I need to go somewhere. I need a change of scenery. So you can always try that in a book. And another thing, my daughter's here, we have had like a Hamilton summer where we have watched it a bunch of times. I've read all the books about it, but something really interesting that Lin-Manuel Miranda does is like this art of the reprisal, where there's sort of one thread at the beginning, look around, how lucky we are to be alive right now means one thing in the beginning. And then in the middle, once they're in the midst of war, look around, how lucky we are to be alive right now kind of means something completely different. And then, so that's something you can have a bit of progress as you're going. And I think if nothing else, the middle symbolizes some kind of progress to an end, whether it's a downward stroke, whether it is sort of that more traditional narrative arc, whatever it is sort of like, you feel like you're moving somewhere, right? You're not stuck in the mud, basically.
Yeah, I think as a reader and a writer, I want complications and a deepening of those initial expectations. I'm also always drawn to the darker storylines where things go badly and don't need it to be a 3-act structure, but I need things to to feel changes and to feel, and those can be internal, they can be external, it depends on the book. As a writer, I'm looking for further questions that I didn't know I had that I'm chasing further into the story. Yeah.
Is that plot-wise? Is it character-wise? Is it theme-wise?
Sometimes it is directly related to the book in terms of character and plot and theme. And sometimes it is large unanswerable questions that I'm dealing with in my life that this story is a way that I'm exploring. And I often know that I'm writing the right book when I get to that, oh, this is what this book is really about to me, whether or not it will be that to the reader. And it's, related to some childhood trauma or some ongoing interest or some peculiarity that I love, but it's something that to me needs to be explored, and I'm doing it through these characters and through this plot. Yeah. Though, Alex, you also mentioned the opportunity to ask questions in the middle, and I'd love to hear more about some of the questions you ask yourself when you are in the middle.
So I feel like I'm like confessing something, but I am neither a plotter or a pantser. I'm kind of both, depends on the day and how it's going. So I have thrown myself into, right now I'm actually writing my first adult. I know, everybody pray for me, light candles, okay? But so I threw myself into it because I had this idea that it was like a shiny idea that I loved, and it like a premise and characters, and I went in there. But when I went in there, I wasn't asking all those questions. I had some questions, and I wanted to find the answers to. And then as I went on, as I'm about 50% in, I'm almost the middle. Yeah, I'd say so. I'm starting to ask myself larger questions, and some of them are, how do the systems in this, because even if you're writing contemporary in the real world, you're building a particular cultural or regional cosmology, right? So there are things that you are building about how things work in this place. So I have larger questions about that, how law enforcement works, how certain aspects of cultural systems in this special place, how they stay complicit. So I'm asking myself these questions, and then I'm making my characters answer them. So, and that's happening in the middle. There weren't necessarily things that I started with. So I'm asking about how the systems work. I'm asking about how the people in this system who are grown up in this system feel about the way these things work. And so there are questions of like, that you might even ask yourself on a daily living in the world that we do. You have to figure out how to get your shopping done and whatever, but you also have to figure out, what are you doing in the world as a person who wants to do good? Like, how do you do that? How do you not? What can you pay attention to? So my characters are having the same questions. I don't know if I answered your question.
You did.
Okay, cool.
John, do you have questions you tend to ask yourself in the middle of a novel?
Beginning, middle, end, I think. Yeah, I mean, I don't, I like Alexandra, I'm not a plotter or a pantser. I'm definitely not a plotter, but I'm also, there's a quote that I really love from Douglas Kearney's book, Mess and. He's a poet. And this book is sort of a craft book, but also sort of a poetry collection. It's really, it's kind of my vibe because I don't know what the hell it is. But the quote has stuck with me so much, I have it now on my arm. But he says, the tricky thing is, if I know what it's going to be, if I know certainly what I'm going to write, then I don't have to write it because I'll learn nothing from it. And that's kind of my approach, is like, I have a premise, I have an idea, and then I just kind of go. And I think if it's hitting for me personally, then I keep going. I mean, I have a few trusted beta readers that I send stuff to, but for the most part, I'm kind of a selfish writer. I'm writing the book I want to read. And if that, and often the books that I want to read are asking questions to which I don't have the answers, and I'm not trying to answer them. I'm sort of just asking the question because I know that if I have them, others do too. Right. So.
Are you letting those beta readers in while you're in the middle of your process, or are you
Oh, yeah.
waiting until you have a full draft? You do?
Yeah, oh yeah. Like almost every time I've completed a writing session, because I don't write every day, I'll just hit them up and say, hey, do you have time to check this out, see if it's still vibing, and they'll read it and send it back.
Amy Jo, what about you? In the middle, are you letting anyone else in?
Never. Never. It is almost done before I let anybody see it. And I think the reason that is, if you've ever, gone to grad school or done a workshop or something like that, and you've written pages and then you share them a week later, obviously they're still in process. Getting intense feedback too early, I think, can push you away from experimentation, away from trying something new, away from looking for what your heart is actually trying to get at. So the questions that I ask myself in the middle, though, I think consequentially are, what am I doing? Why did I choose this? Am I a failure? If you ask my husband, he'll be like, how was today? And I'm like, that's it. I'm done. Like, I don't have, it's going terribly. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, it's done. Like that is, it's not going well until all of a sudden it's done.
Does he know to go, okay, and just like,
yep. He goes,
fade
oh,
away?
he says,
He's like, okay.
He is the best human because he will say, oh, we're there again. Okay. And he'll say, okay. He'll say, just remember, this is part of the process. So I think I tend to ask sort of these existential questions, but then I think it's okay to make room for that, because sometimes if you shut off, say, don't feel that way, you got to press forward, you're kind of shutting down everything else that's creative about you. So it's okay to feel like you might be taking a big leap and then also a big fall. I think, that old idea that, there's no reward without some risk. You feel that in the middle, especially, which brings me to my question. So we've been talking about the middle, quote unquote, of a book, but there's the middle of a book and there's the middle of the writing process, and they are very different. And I would love to know, how do you know you're in the middle? What sort of symptoms occur for you, or signals that says, oh, I'm there, I'm in the middle? Or if you have any, because I think something to keep in mind too, we can all do this in retrospect. Say, oh, well, with this book, it was this, and with that, it was that. Sometimes you can look back and see something, but while you're in the middle of it, you can't really see what it is. So do you kind of know when you're in the middle?
No. of the writing process? No. No. Again, because sometimes I'm plotting, sometimes I'm pantsing, sometimes I'm doing some various things that I don't know what I'm doing. I do think, like you, Amy Jo, that I will have moments where I'm like, oh, this is garbage. How did I not know this before? Why did no one tell me? Wait a minute. And then I'm like, this is the garbage stage. This is the famous, I think everything I do is garbage stage. That is a real stage. And so I feel like there's that part of it. And then there's a part where I'm just like, you must finish it, give it to your trusted beta readers, and you must get there. And then you can cry about garbage, which I do. I cry about the garbage that I write, and then turns out it's not garbage. Because someone will be like, this was great. I'll be like, no, it's garbage. Oh, wait, what? Okay, you liked it? Okay. So, like, I'm the worst judge of my own work and process, which is why I like to talk about it with you lovely people to try to get some clarity.
How about you, John? Do you have any sense when you've hit a middling point?
No. But mostly because I think my process is I've gotten to the point where I know myself well enough that if I were to write every day and have this sort of super structured approach, that my imposter syndrome would spiral. Because when I did try to force myself to write every day, it was usually like, if I hit 250 words and I'm done for the day, and they'd be the worst 250 words, they would never get used, they would never be seen in my manuscript, and that's when I start spiraling, where I'm just like, this is no good, this story is not good, this idea is not good. If I sit with things for a long time and the ideas keep coming to me, it feels like if I don't write it now, I might lose it. That's when some of my best stuff comes out. Like, I usually don't have a lot of revisions by the time I'm done, because I'm only sitting at the page or sitting at the computer when the time clicks here that it's right. So there's no middle because I don't kind of know where I begin and where I end. It's just when the time is right.
I love hearing that because I think something else that often happens with writers is sometimes you will write a whole manuscript from beginning to end and you hand it over to your editorial team, or for whatever reason, they might say, this is not your next book. And then at that point, you're like, I thought I was at the end, but I'm at the beginning. That's pretty common. I think it's fair to say. So how about you, Anica? Any signposts for you?
Oh gosh, it's different for each project, and I think some of what you're hearing is we are terrible judges of our own work and sometimes of our own process. But I think one of the skills of becoming a better writer is becoming more and more attuned to your own process and patterns, because it's different for each of us. And John saying, I know that if I write every day, here's what goes wrong, right? You had to figure that out. And now that you know that, and like you're saying, it can be useful to talk through. I never show my middles to a friend, but I do talk through my process over and over with Amy Jo throughout, and having someone who can say, oh, this is the part where you tend to feel this way, like your husband was doing, it can be so useful to helping you notice that and say, oh, okay, so if I'm feeling terrible about my book in the beginning stage where I'm usually so excited about those ideas and just having that flurry, maybe I'm not onto something yet. If I'm having that feeling in the middle where I always reach the swamp of sadness, here we are in the swamp of sadness. Great, right? And just knowing that, oh, here's when I need a snack and a nap, and here's when I need to go back to the brainstorming table. You learn those things by paying attention to your own sort of physical and mental state throughout the process, and I just think that's key to getting through the middle. I don't know, when you're feeling stuck or uncertain, either in that mental game or with what's actually going to happen on the page, what has gotten you through it?
Reading. All the time. Yeah, that's always my solution for getting stuck, is I go to the writers that inspire me or whose work I'm hoping to, a tradition I can step into. And also poetry unlocks writing for me hugely. There's just something about the economy of phrasing in poetry and the imagery that just and sort of this sort of boundlessness on the page that I don't think we always see in prose. That's always a big thing for me when I'm stuck.
So I'm going to go on a tangent. It'll be fun. Come with me. I have an MFA in painting. I don't have any qualifications whatsoever to be a writer, like zero. So I didn't know that the idea of a mentor text was a thing. I thought I created it. I was like, guys, I don't know if you knew this, but you take a book you love and have read, and then you go back and annotate it. I've invented something. It turns out I did not invent this, and this is what MFAs and other people do all the time. But if you haven't been to an MFA, I highly recommend, like you said, reading, but taking that text you're already familiar with and going back and annotating it and finding where that structure is. Because when you read it the first time, you're reading it with so much joy and in pleasure, you're not even noticing the structure. You're not even noticing where those questions come up, where those opportunities are. When you go back, it's like, I'm like, oh, damn, page 3, and we're already setting this up, and it's wonderful. So mentor text, in case you haven't done an MFA. And the other thing that I like to do, because this worked a lot for me when I was stuck with The Grief Keeper, and then this one as well, I do something called deleted scenes, where I write a scene that I know will never and should never be in my book. So there is no pressure. It is never going to show up in there. It's not moving the story forward. It's not doing anything. It's just something that I am curious about in either the past of my characters or some future time that is outside of the story world. And I just want to sort of play with the characters and their environment and their family and just see where it goes. And that just gives me a looseness that really helps get me back on track.
I love that. I love that. I want to try all these things. And because I'm trying to think, like, what do I do that gets me unstuck? And I really think, everybody's going to tell you take a break. That does not work for me. I just have to keep showing up at my writing desk, and I have the most frustrating seasons where I just feel like my writing is kind of giving me the silent treatment. But it's just this, I think the act of writing for me feels very cathartic. And it sort of is this ritual that I think grounds my daily life. And so even if it just means I'm sitting and I'm frustrated and I rework one sentence 100 times and then cut it, I know if I keep showing up and keep showing up and keep showing up, that one day it's going to break open, and it's probably not going to be in the way that I hope or the way that I expect, but there's something about continuing to show up that I think works for me personally. Yeah. How about you?
When it's mentally stuck, I try to be as specific with myself as possible about what I'm afraid of and why. And that often comes back to some variation on a fear of mediocrity. And then I say, okay, so if I write a mediocre draft, so what? Right. If I don't, right? You know, and the more specific, the more you can break it down for yourself. Okay, maybe I'm worrying about a problem I don't need to worry about yet, right? And I'm equally afraid of living a mediocre version of my own life, which for me would involve not being creative and not making things. So let's not stop this and open up that other fear. If I'm stuck on plot things, I have two things that I do. First, I go back and see what's there and what else it can show me, because we've mentioned the breadcrumbs that get planted. I think that our brains know things about our stories that we don't know, or that once we get further in, we understand in a different way. And saying, okay, what else does this moment show me? What else does this character's reaction tell me about her? What else, right? And, you were saying, should they go on a trip? For me, it's often, should the weather change? Should she be out of milk, right? Give me something that changes, that gives me something to write about. But the way I find my way through the middle of a story is I also don't plot entirely in advance, and I also am not looking for a specific structure, but I'm looking for a movement of tensions. So I'm asking myself, scene by scene, what does this character want, wonder, hope for, expect, notice? And how is that different from what she wanted, wondered, hoped, noticed, expected, feared, whatever it is, in the previous scene, right? So what's the shift there? Part of how I'm finding that in the very first draft is also tapping into, what am I wondering, noticing, wanting, noticing, expecting? And I think some of the tensions come from what is the reader wanting, noticing, wondering, expecting, fearing. The main characters are the reader's conduit into the story, usually. And sometimes what we want or hope or expect mirrors what the main character wants. But not always. There's often a gap between what we know or understand of the world or the situation and what the character does. So if she really wants that boy to notice her, but we understand that he's bad news, we want her to get what she wants in a way because we care about her, but we also don't want her with him, right? So we don't want her heartbroken, but this is not a good idea, right? So there's a tension in there. So I'm following that tension and noticing how it shifts. And those questions of what does the character want, notice, wonder, fear, expect, you have those overarching things, right? She wants to save her sister from the dragons that kidnapped her. That's going to remain the same until she rescues her sister. But in this scene, she might also want that guy to shut up and want a nap and want to get this pebble out of her shoe, right? So noticing those things, and that gives you something to keep on changing and moving. And also therein for me lies the tensions. Yeah.
In 1 minute, we're going to open it up to Q&A so we can get your thoughts and any questions that you might have. But I thought one question to just sort of finish off this part of it is, we've talked about middle of a book, middle of the writing process. We are also, I think, what you could consider mid-career. We've all published multiple books. What is one thing you would tell your younger writer self?
Why do you look at me? Like, honestly, John, we're going to talk. We're going to talk. I think, well, like I mentioned, that I'm writing an adult book, which I never had any intention. I, read YA, love YA, and thought that that's what I was going to write. It's what I enjoy reading. But every opportunity, when someone has said, for example, would you like to be in a short story anthology? I had never written a short story. I was like, yes, sure, of course. Why not? I've said yes. And I think that's what I would tell my younger self when I was embarking in this. I'd say just keep saying yes, because you have so much more possibility than you think you do, especially when you're thinking of things that might be a little scary, poetry, or at least for me, or writing for an adult audience, or writing short stories. I'm not saying I excel at all of those, but I was able to do it. And I feel like that continuing to surprise yourself is something that I feel like I can tell myself, and P.S. I did it, continue to surprise yourself.
Yeah, I love that. Mm-hmm. Either one? Anybody?
I talk a lot with high school students and middle schoolers because I write for those age groups. And I advise them, lean into your weird.
I should have gone.
And I wish that in my earlier writing days, I had been brave enough to do that more. I think my writing has gotten much, much better since I've embraced that, partly by giving that advice to other people. Sometimes trying to articulate what you're trying to do or wishing other people would do makes you do that more. But I think really following your own oddities and specifics and what you love is the way to begin and continue. And getting braver and braver about that has made me a better writer. Yeah.
I can go. I think what I would say is don't let someone else define you. Because once you step into writing is its own thing when it's yours and it's just your notebook. And then once you step into sharing that writing, for whatever reason in the publishing world, everybody wants to put a label on you. I mean, when I was in grad school, everybody told me you're an editor, not a writer. And then, people try to, are you women's fiction? Are you horror? Are you literary fiction? All these things. And it's very easy to get caught up looking at yourself from the outside in, but let other people do that. They're going to do it anyway. Let them do it. You are the only one that looks from the inside out. And that's what you bring to the page. And that's how you finish a book, is from the inside out. So if you can hold on to that, it will at least give you an anchor when things get a little bit bananas.
I mean, I was going to do the weird thing, but that's been taken. But I mean, that would have been what I'd said. So I will say, I would tell myself, find the humor in your Goodreads reviews. Because I used to get really freaked out by them, and like the bad ones now, I love them. They're so much fun.
Some of them are really funny.
They're very
I'm
funny.
not there yet.
Oh, it's great. It's great. Well, especially because there's so many of them, you can tell they didn't actually read the book.
Or they're like, this book has immigrants. I'm like, well,
Yeah,
I could have saved you your $20 right there.
Sorry. But to go back to the weirdness thing, I think like my first book, it was my MFA thesis. I was, so I was like writing my serious literary novel, and I love that book. But it wasn't all of me. And I was a weird kid. I'm a weird adult. Now that I'm letting myself get weird on the page, I'm having the most fun I think I've had as a writer. So the one I'm working on now is just batshit. But I'm having a blast. So I think, not that I didn't enjoy the process before, but I would have enjoyed it more if I had just kind of let myself be me.
And I think that always comes across in the book, too, when a writer has loved writing the book. I think you can feel it. Yeah. Okay. So if you have a question, we'd love to hear from you.
So, great panel. I got 1,000 questions, but the thing that is most I'm concerned about is the self-publishing. Is it, I guess it is better to have an established publisher, and if so, what do they offer? And then how do you get contacted? How do you get in touch with a publisher if you want to go that way?
I mean, that's a whole nother panel. Yeah, I mean, it really is.
And we
I
probably
think-
will do one on the logistics of the publishing
and I'd
process
be
down the road for
happy
sure.
to come back for that one because I talk about it all the time because I feel like there is some opacity there that is intentional. I think there's a lot of gatekeeping that goes on and trying to prevent people from getting to that level, especially if you're from a marginalized community. So I think first step is getting your work in front of an agent. If you want to go the traditional publishing route, right? That's not to say that you always have to have an agent. There are smaller independent presses who, I'll make the argument, even though we're at the same publisher, that like some of these smaller independent presses, I think are much less risk averse and will look at things that I think are more aesthetically pleasing to me as a reader. So that some of those presses will look at manuscripts without agent representation, but you do have to do some research to find that. If you want the more quote unquote traditional publishing, an agent is your first step. An agent then will have relationships with editors that will get your manuscript in front of editors at these publishing houses, and then they make those decisions from there. That's like the very condensed version of it. Yeah.
And in terms of which is better, I think it really depends on the project and your goals and
Absolutely.
your skills. Because if you're self-publishing, you will need to figure out editing and the cover and the marketing and the publicity and things like that, which theoretically our publishers do for us on each book, though your mileage will vary on what happens. So if it's in your hands, you have the control on that, and you have to become an expert in so many more things or hire experts in so many more things. Yeah. So I think that's the give and take of, do you want to spend the time and money and energy on that? Or, right, to get the work out there? And sometimes, yes. Yeah. People who are good at self-publishing are great at self-publishing. Yeah. So there's no hierarchy of, yeah.
Poets and Writers is a really good resource for all publishing. Like they'll list all the independent publishers, all the traditional publishers, and how you can contact them. And I believe that's a free resource on the web. I know Publishers Marketplace is also good for that, but it's a fairly expensive subscription. But check Poets and Writers first.
I have a question. Have any of you introduced a very important character right in the middle or almost in the middle of any of your books? How effective, ineffective? Do you recommend, not recommend?
That is my favorite move. Literally, I think every single book in the middle, I'm like, boom. And it's somebody that's kind of on the periphery. So I don't know if I've ever done it that everybody's like, wait, who is this guy? It's somebody that you sort of like maybe heard a little bit about. But I think for me, something so satisfying as a reader when you kind of think, okay, this is the world I'm in and this is how things are. And then it's not just, oh, the world isn't as you thought it was, but it's the character saying, hey, this is not what you think it is. And the psychology that comes with a character that thinks everybody has gotten everything wrong about them. And this character is very misunderstood. I think feeling misunderstood is such a fun character motivation to play with. So when I talk about, a middle being surprised and things like that, that's my favorite thing. Be like, here's this person that's going to talk now that you didn't think was going to have anything to say. And guess what? They do. I love to do that.
One thing I always tell my students is to remove should from your vocabulary when you're talking about writing. This is art and it's creation, and if it feels right to introduce the character at that point, introduce them at that point. But I think getting into these ideas of rules and what you should or should not do, this is such a subjective industry. One editor is going to say, don't ever do that, and another editor is going to be like, I love that. So if it works for you as a storyteller, then that's what you should do. That's what I invite you to do.
Other questions?
Do you have, can you hear me?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Do you have a technique for adding humor in your work?
I think humor, I do not have an answer for this. I'm going to pass it off to somebody else. I think humor is so much harder than sadness, than confusion, than frustration, than anger. I think it's a real skill.
I have two things. First, I rely on banter very heavily because a lot of the humor will be in interactions. Oh, I have three things. And another thing is that I think a lot of humor can be about the meeting or subverting of expectations, right? A joke lays the groundwork of here's what we expect, and then the surprise of that, humor and surprise can be very close to each other. So looking for how can I make the funny surprising? Can I remember my third thing? It was the best one. It'll come back to me when one of you jumps in if you've got one.
For me, I'm super attracted to the absurd. I think so. Anything that just to your point, I think that subverts expectations. But then maybe like even take it up a notch. And if I think it's funny, I sort of trust it. But then I will go to my because I have beta readers that'll be like, dude, that's not funny. Or if they're like mildly offended, then I'm like, okay, that's staying in there. So I don't know that I have a specific technique other than I just kind of like to push the boundaries and see how far I can go with it.
I remembered my third thing,
Yes.
which is finding humor by being as specific as possible about that character and their, there's something funny in a very distinct point of view, and it's funnier if it'll feel more real the more specific to that character it is. So, we all expect, universal something will be the most universally relatable, but actually very specific characters and their emotions, their humor, their lives are what we relate to most strongly because that feels most real.
No.
See, the unexpected. I didn't know he would.
Well, that is actually that's what I was going to say about. I find when I'm writing, the most humor that I can inject into a story is through dialogue, and it's when the person who's speaking surprises the person they're speaking to, and it's an unexpected. Sometimes dialogue you're trying to get information out, you're trying to move things forward, right? But you're also trying to. These two or several people are communicating things about each other, themselves to each other. Right, and when they cause a little friction, because they're those people. I write about teens, so when they cause friction by subverting what's expected and say something unexpected, that's funny. And so even when you're writing dialogue and you're thinking, well, a person like that would say this, do the opposite, turn it on its head, and then have the other character react to it, because then it's like, oh, what do I do now? Like now I have to react in a way I didn't expect. So I think that unexpected in dialogue.
But like with all things of leaning into your own weird and annotating the mentor text that you're brought to, I think you have to figure out what's really funny to you. I used to study Weird Al lyrics, and why is the number 19 here funnier than another number? It is, but why? And thinking about that, right? Like digging into, okay, I found this situation funny. Let me break it down until it's so not funny anymore, because I think that's how you get there, to figure out what makes you laugh.
I also think what makes satire particularly funny is that it goes against the social contract, right? Like there are things that we say we don't say, or we don't say in polite company, and satire says them. And sometimes the laughter that comes out of that is uncomfortable laughter, right? But it's still kind of laughter. So I tend to think about that as well, as like what could I say here, and what would people think I probably shouldn't say here, but I'm gonna say it anyway. And a lot of humor, I think, comes out of that.
Obviously, we should do a whole other.
Question about nonlinear structure or non-traditional structure. So if you're teaching a course, what are some of the fundamentals that you would teach about nonlinear structures, good ways to go about it and still have a coherent narrative?
That's interesting, because by nature of something being nonlinear, I don't really teach structure around it. I teach a lot of workshops, so oftentimes students are bringing either excerpts of novels or short stories that they're working on, And one of the things that I teach them is about staying on the page when giving workshop feedback, because a lot of times their minds do think about, like, where does this belong in the story? Why don't I have this information beforehand? Why don't I have this information? And it's none of that's important. The only thing that's important at that time is what's on the page in front of them. So I don't really teach how to make something non-linear, because that's sort of by nature of it making it somewhat linear. Do you understand, if that makes sense? Like, I don't like creating a structure around something that should be structureless. So really, a lot of the times I'm just encouraging my students to experiment, bring whatever it is that they want to be workshopped. We'll talk about the story in a larger scheme, but it really sort of depends on what I'm working on with a student as well. Like, if they're working on a longer work, then we can start to have those conversations about, would this be would this make more sense? Would this be clearer in a traditional structure, or would it make sense to move things around? But it's so bespoke to the writer that it's kind of hard to have like a definitive way to do it. I don't know if that answers your question, but.
I also teach in an MFA program at Vermont College of Fine Arts, and I actually do teach this.
Okay.
Thinking about two things. One is there a shape you have in mind?
Mm-hmm.
Are you picturing a spiral or a square or a, something? If you're a person who sort of feels structure in that way, it doesn't have to be linear, but is there a shape to it? And whether or not the answer is yes, because in my writing, I don't tend to have that shape, actually. But those questions that I mentioned earlier about what is the reader going to wonder, notice, want, fear, that the reader part of that, not just the characters or you, can help you determine the order of things for your nonlinear story. That the structure comes from, even if you're not building the story in a timeline that is straight, what is the shape of the tensions that you're going for? Where are you building or lowering those? And that can help you think about what gets revealed at what moment. So I'm going to structure the story around this shape of tension. And that determines what I need to know when, and where I'm directing people's attention when. So there's a lot of thinking about the reader there. Yeah.
Say you think you're done with a book and you submit it to your editorial team and they tell you it's not done. How do you sit with those feelings? How do you trust if you think they're wrong? What does that conversation look like with your agent or whoever you're working with? How do you even get an agent? How would you publish a volume of poetry? I've got a lot of questions, but whichever one you want to answer, go for it.
I mean, I can't do the poetry one, but I can talk to you a little bit about having that lovely feeling when your editor was like, ¿Qué es esto? ¿Qué es esto? What is this? Which has happened to me. And my editor, Stacey Barney at Nancy Paulson at Penguin, and she has always said to me, it's your name on the book, so I'm going to tell you what I think, and then you come back and tell me if you disagree with me. We'll hash it out. So just knowing that, it just takes me some time to sit there and saying, okay, what is she saying? How does this resonate in my own chest? Because you know, when you know, like when you hear it and it's true, for me at least, I know. And then I have gone out and said, no, this is the way I want it to be. This is the way that I think is best. This is the cultural understanding that you know your story better than anyone else, even an editor at Penguin. So there's that fine line to balance, listening to them because they know what they're doing and they're only there to make your work better, but also understand there are things they don't know about your experiences, the story you're trying to tell. And I think that crying, sorry, it's true. I let myself cry. I know John does too. You just let yourself cry and just be like, because it hurts. It's very real and it hurts, and you've put so much yourself into it. And then when you're done crying, you go back to work. And it has never, ever happened to me where I haven't gone back to work and finish it, where it hasn't been miles better. Not one time.
Yeah, I would largely agree with that. Poetry, you don't need an agent. Usually your best route to first publication is usually some type of contest through some of the publishers. They're running poetry, chapbook, first collection book. They're running contests all the time. There are very few poets I know that have agents, though, because the pitch process is completely different. As far as editors, I guess I've been really lucky in that regard, especially with Brian at Celadon, because the Devil is Fine, the book that I pitched my editor, is wildly different than what I turned in. And I just was kind of like, send. And his the first sentence of his email back was like, well, this is not what we talked about. But then he was in, which I was like, okay, that's great. And he had one suggestion. And I think I had gotten to the point where I'm not super precious about my work. Like, it's important to me and I love it, but I'm also, I realize enough that I'm too close to it as a writer, and this guy's an editor for a reason. And he gave me one simple suggestion that opened up the rest of the book. So I try not to approach those situations with trepidation, but more like, what can I learn from this? And I think that makes it less traumatic.
Yes to sitting with feelings. When I get an editorial comment that I initially want to reject, I sit with those feelings first. Nobody appreciates my genius. And then I think, okay, but if I had to incorporate this, how would I do it? Just to prove them wrong, right? And then you tap into your way of doing that, because the comment might be getting at something that isn't, or their suggestion might be off, but you know this book. And then 90% of the time, it turns out I didn't appreciate their genius. I have had the experience of turning in a book that was under contract that I thought would become published the next year. And my editor basically said, my brilliant editor said, what is this? And why did you write it? Which are legitimate questions that an author needs to be able to answer. And I could not answer them to both of our satisfaction at that time. And I sat with it for a while, and I thought, okay. And then some of her feedback too, I'd done okay, if I had to incorporate this, how would I do it? And I just, I'm not sure there's a version of this book that she and I will both love and understand. So I said, how about if I write you something else? And she said, oh, thank goodness. And I put that story away for a long time, but it would not let me go. And it got published by a different editor this year. So 8 years later. So time and perseverance and having something to prove to yourself and the world, and moving on to the next project. Never have just one project that is the only one. Even if you have one that is so important to you that 8 years later you're going to try again, try the next thing. You will grow and come back to it and see what's important again.
Well said. I got to say, we're going to wrap it up here, but I want you to know I'm sitting on the stage with 3 incredibly talented, huge-hearted writers and humans, and you are such a gift. Thank you for sharing this time. If you are able... Oh, you got a question, my girl!
What, out of the books that you wrote, what was your favorite middle?
I don't think she's asking just me. You can start. I got to go with Shiner. A moonshiner shows up in the middle, and that's my favorite, I'd say.
Oh, my one-sentence chapter for certain.
One-sentence chapter.
Definitely my favorite.
Wishing Season, my middle grade novel about grief and community, because it was the hardest to get through, and I'm so proud of how it turned out.
I actually think the middle of one of my short stories in the We Only Come Out at Night anthology, because in the middle of this short story, a sea witch shows up unexpected, and speaks and says some things. That's my favorite.
fantastic questions. This is also an aspiring budding writer who is with us in the pink shirt, so thank you for that. Yeah. Two things. As I said, I mean, just uncommon talent and heart up here on the stage. If you are able to buy a book today, please do. It helps us not only continue to do what we do, it helps Labyrinth to continue to do what it does and the library, and it's going to enrich your life tenfold, I promise. We will be discussing the ending on November 12th, I believe. So if you can make it here for that, it's going to be great. We'll have a different panel. If you would like to be added to our email list, there are 2 spots for lists. One is over at the signing table here, and I believe one is on the book table right at the end of the stairs. But thank you so much for coming out and with your questions, and we hope to see you again in November. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.